So Acer is not dipping their toes in the handheld market, they are diving in head first. And at CES 2025, they're not announcing just one, not just two, but 3 new handhelds. And they've made some very interesting choices, so let's go over them and also compare and contrast a little bit to the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally. So on the table here, I have the new Acer Nitro Blaze 8 and the new Acer Nitro Blaze 11. Now we already saw the Nitro Blaze 7 at IFA. Unfortunately, they don't have one here to compare and contrast, but that one is a little more standard 7-inch. The Nitro Blaze 8 is actually 8.8 inch, so that is similar specs-wise to the actual Lenovo Legion Go. So it is a very large handheld, but you know what? It pales in comparison when you're sitting here with the Nitro Blaze 11, which is actually 10.95, so, but 11, it's 11 pretty much. And yeah, all of them kind of have mostly similar specs, but there are some kind of differences. So first off, let's compare all 3 of them spec-wise. So the 7 is using the 7840HS, and these 2 are using the 8840HS. They both, or all 3 of them, feature the 780M graphics, so you're going to get about the same graphic performance on all 3 of them, but the configuration of the CPU part of it changes a little bit between the 7840HS and the 8840HS. We'll have to see in testing what that really matters, because it's not just the performance of the chip itself, but it's also the chassis. The 7's going to be smaller, these ones are larger, have different cooling capabilities, so we'll kind of have to see where performance plays out in that. So the other differences to kind of highlight is the screen. So obviously there's a screen size, 7, 8.8, and 11, but the configurations are different. The 7-inch that we don't have here is 1080p. The 8.8 inch here and the 11 is 2560 by 1600. So higher resolution on the bigger screens, which makes sense. I mean, it's still kind of overkill for handhelds in my opinion, but whatever, we won't go there. The 7-inch has a 144 hertz refresh rate panel, so does the 8.8, but interestingly, the larger 11 only has 120 hertz refresh rate. I mean, is it really that big of a difference? No. Is this chipset going to be able to push that high frame rate most of the time anyway? It depends on the game that you're playing, so I don't know. That doesn't bug me as much. They're all going to feature 16 gigabytes of LPDDR5X, rated at 7,500 megatransfers per second, and they're all going to feature up to 2 terabytes of a Gen 4 NVMe SSD, but the sizing changes. So the 7 and the 8.8 is going to have 2240 M.2 sizing, but the 11-inch is actually going to feature the full 2280. So a little bit different in terms of costs if you actually wanted to swap it in. They're not allowing me to open up these devices to kind of look inside, but they're saying it is user serviceable, the SSD, and you should be able to swap it out. So 3 last things to note spec-wise. They all feature Hall effect sticks and triggers. They all come in at different sizing and weight, obviously. The 7 is going to be 670 grams. The 8.8 is actually 720 grams, so not too far off. And the 11-inch is going to clock in at 1,050 grams, so much heavier than the other 2. But interestingly enough, the last major spec is the battery capacity. So the 7 is going to have 50 watt hours. The 8.8 has 55, which usually at this size, you could get a bigger battery in here. But really, most interestingly, is that the 11 has the same 55 watt hour battery. That seems to be something that I'm not quite sure of why they made that decision, because it is a much bigger space. You could theoretically put a bigger battery in there. So Acer tells me the reason why they did that is, you know, mostly for weight consideration, because it is kind of a larger device. And yeah, I don't know. I'm curious. I wish it had a larger capacity on these bigger versions, but yeah. I'm not sure where that's gonna align with the audience out there. And the last major thing to note is the pricing. So the 7-inch version is going to clock in at $800. The 8.8 version is going to clock in at $900, and the 11-inch version is going to clock in at $1,100. So they're targeting 3 different price points, but those are already very high price points, and $1,100 is like the highest from a major vendor. All right, let's talk about the actual hardware. So let's start with the 8.8 inch version. There is a nice texture on the grips here, very fine little bumps, but it doesn't carry through the whole thing. It's mostly just around the side and transitioning into the back here. In terms of the actual buttons, you got 4 face buttons, which have a nice give to them, even a little click to it. It actually feels pretty good. Once again, I'm gonna have to do a lot of testing. You've got the 2 buttons over here, which are very tactile, very clicky, and of course the Hall effect sticks. They got even some RGB in there for all your lighting needs. Off to this side, we have a D-pad. It feels a little mushy at first press, but you know, not too bad. I'm not a fighting game player, so I'm not super particular, and also these edges aren't very sharp, so I do kind of like that. We have the Nitro launcher and the other button over here, so this is kind of the common space, and then of course the other stick. Looking up at the top, we of course have the actual triggers and the bumpers. I will say the bumpers, you can actually click across the whole range pretty easily, and it is a very loud and satisfying click. I do like it. The actual triggers feel good. It's not too mushy at full depression. That feels pretty good. Across the top here, we have 2 vents, because there is 2 fans in this solution. Power button, volume rocker, and 2 USB-C ports. One of them you can see is labeled with the 40 watt. One of them is just super speed, so if you need more throughput, you definitely want to use this 40 watt here. But it doesn't just feature 2 USB ports. If we look down here at the bottom, look at that, a 3rd USB port. Not only a 3rd one, it is a Type A. So this is also just super speed, so it's not the fastest port that's on here, but that is actually pretty nice. Unfortunately, it has downward facing speakers. I would have hoped that it had front firing speakers. We'll have to see what the quality sounds like when we do some testing. Oddly enough, the headphone jack is down at the bottom, right at the center. That is a kind of an odd placement. And then you do have a micro SD card slot. Turning around on the back, we see the nice big Nitro logo here with that trademark N. I actually kind of like this design language. It's not very flashy. I would say this is actually better than what's featured on the 7, because that was very in your face. This is still flashy, but it doesn't have any crazy colors or anything like that. But you can see the dual fan intake, and I did look in there. I don't know if you can see on video, but you can actually see 2 tiny fans in there. And interestingly, only 2 back buttons, and they actually feel pretty good. You can kind of click them evenly on both sides, so that's not bad. So that is the 8.8 inch version, which is a very large device in its own right, but it actually doesn't feel too heavy, especially compared to something like the Legion Go, which I don't have on me, but this is clocking in lighter than that. Obviously has a smaller battery than some that are out there, but it actually felt pretty good in the hand. Something that's a little bigger and a little heavier is that Blaze 11. So now let's go over the actual physical specifications here. Starting at the front, we of course got that big beautiful display. Same kind of design language and grips off to the side here, which wrap around the back. Hall effect. The buttons actually feel very similar to what's on the 8-inch version, so that feels good. Same thing with these. Actually, these buttons are a little different. It has more of a fine edge to them, where the other ones are kind of curved. And also the placement is kind of curved for better handling. Moving around to this side, this D-pad appears to be the same, so a little squishy, but the edges are not sharp. The same Hall effect, and then these 2 buttons are once again oriented a little bit different for that extra reach. I did notice that the bezel is actually a little larger on this 11-inch version, and you can see that it has a webcam built in here. I need to confirm if this is Windows Hello or not, but this has a webcam where the other 2 versions do not. Looking at the buttons across the top, we actually have this little rocker here that is spring-loaded that I don't know what it does. We're trying to get some information, so maybe we'll do an overlay to tell you what that is, but that is a mystery to me. We do have a power button, volume rocker, and all three of the ports, USB-C ports, or USB ports, are up here. These are not labeled, unfortunately, to tell the difference between what's super speed and, well, I'm going to assume that the Type A is super speed, but maybe both of these are the faster spec USB 4, but they're not properly labeled, so I do not have confirmation here. You see a little microphone indicator, the headset jack, micro SD card slot, and then you can see that there's only one venting port, which means there is only one fan. So around the back we see the Nitro logo as well, and then of course this port for a singular fan. I can't get in there specifically to see, but the fan does appear to be larger than what's on the 8. So maybe the cooling capacity is very similar. And then at the bottom here, you can see a nice little kickstand. So this actually, even though it's a thin kind of bar, it does feel pretty sturdy. I'm kind of yanking on it a little bit. I think this should be pretty sturdy for a kickstand. Also 2 of the back buttons, and you can see, what are these buttons down here? Oh, by the way, just like the Lenovo Legion Go, these are detachable controllers. And they actually seem to use the same pogo pin and plastic locking mechanism as the Lenovo Legion Go, so this is a known quantity. I will say this feels more sturdy than the Legion Go, but once again we'll have to get it in for some further testing. But really the last thing hardware-wise to look at here is on the bottom. You've got 2 bottom-facing speakers. We'll see how the quality is, but unfortunately we have no idea what this port is. Acer tells me that maybe it's for an unannounced product. Maybe that's what that spring at the top is for, is to undock it. I'm not quite sure. Either way, we obviously see some pogo pins, so there's something that could be coming out at a later date. If I had to guess, maybe it's a dock, maybe it's an external GPU solution. I'm not quite sure. It is interesting. The last major thing to note is the weight and the feel in the hand. Now this is a very, very large handheld, and the actual ergonomics of it very much curve in so that it kind of really palms in your hand and you kind of grip it. I will say, like, just holding it like this, I am struggling to reach some of these top buttons, and even the face buttons I kind of feel myself needing to adjust. This, yeah, I definitely want to spend some time in this to kind of feel how it's going to be, but first glance, I feel like I'm going to be reaching for some of this stuff. It doesn't feel the best to hold in my hand. I will say though, surprisingly, even though it is 2.3 pounds, it does not feel that heavy. Most of the weight is centered in the middle because that's where all the guts are, so it is a little lighter around the edges. But that is, yeah, I'm surprised. It's not as heavy as I expected. The very last thing before we go is that I'm going to do size comparisons. I actually brought with me a couple handhelds. I have the Steam Deck. This is the OLED version. And then I also brought the Asus ROG Ally, the original version, just to kind of compare and contrast. So if we look, this 8.8-inch version is actually pretty similar size-wise. Like it's about the same size coming off the table, about the same width here. Let's kind of look at the thickness. It's definitely taller, obviously, because of that taller screen, and thicker here for sure. But surprisingly, I would say this is closer to a Steam Deck size than the actual Lenovo Legion Go, which also has an 8.8-inch screen. So it feels more compact than what the specs are saying. And compared to the ROG Ally, which is definitely a smaller handheld, it's dwarfing. This is closer to the Acer Nitro Blaze 7 kind of sizing wise. But yeah, comparing it to the 11-inch version, I'm just going to do this just for fun. Obviously, we're talking about two way different screen sizes, but oh boy, that is tall. That is much taller, and I will say the actual body thickness is pretty close. I don't have calipers here to measure, but that is actually pretty close. And it looks like the grips have about the same thickness here. So it's got some good curvature to it. But yeah, I mean, it just looks like a baby. It looks like a baby handheld for babies compared to this 11-inch version. And especially compared to the ROG Ally. So yeah, what started at IFA as a 7-inch version, and you know what it seemed like Acer was just kind of dipping their toes in the water. They are going all the way in headfirst into the handheld landscape and have 3 different models. I am very excited to test all 3 of them because I think that this brings a little bit of fresh eyes to the handheld landscape, especially this 11-inch version. Acer is really going for the moon here, and this is going to be like a halo device. So hopefully it stands up, under testing, but we will see. So for more CES coverage, be sure to subscribe here over on PCWorld, and if you want to watch the original video of the Acer Nitro Blaze 7, go click over here. I almost left and forgot to do the sniff test. Oh. All right, here we go. This is the 8. Oh, it's like a mountain breeze, but kind of warm, like in the summer. Maybe like Camelback Mountain in Phoenix. Oh, it's actually pretty nice. All right, so now for the coup de grace, the 11. Oh, that one's got like berry, like a dark berry cherry, kind of like this one's a little bitter. Yeah, no, not a fan of this one.